Welcome to another exciting episode of Strange Tales Weekly. I'm your host, Jess, and joining me are my co-hosts, Eric.
Hey.
And Joe.
Hey.
Tonight we have a special treat for you. We have Brad Olsen. Brad is the author of 9 books, including 2 in his Esoteric Series, Modern Esoteric and Future Esoteric. An award-winning author, book publisher, event producer. His keynote presentations and interviews have enlightened audiences at Contact in the Desert, Awareness Life Expo, the 5D events, and dozens of radio shows, including Coast to Coast, Ground Zero, and Fade to Black, as well as television shows including Ancient Aliens, America Unearthed, and Mysteries of the Outdoors. Brad is the founder and co-producer of the Weird Street Faire in the SOMA neighborhood of his home base, San Francisco. The Chicago native's esoteric writings continue to reach a wide audience while he continues breaking ground in alternative journalism, public speaking, illustration, and photography. Welcome, Brad.
Hey, guys.
Hey.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for joining us. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got started in researching esoteric topics?
Well, it'll start and it'll finish with the same topic, and that is traveling internationally. And it was really me being a traveler around the world for a number of years, starting with teaching English in Japan, and I got the basis for my first book, World Stompers, and then I did some extreme adventure guides. But then as I continued through traveling through my life and going to other places around the world, I did the Sacred Places series of guidebooks. And then through that research, it really got me interested in these esoteric subjects, because some of the sacred places are like the Great Pyramids, and there's a lot of esoteric meanings in these places that needed further study. Plus, this is what I'm really interested in, this field of study.
So you just started traveling at some point, and then it kind of took off from there? How'd you get started on traveling like that to begin with?
Just a curiosity, wanting to get out of the Midwest a little bit and see the world, and having basically the desire to do it. Started by painting houses and making the money in the Arlington Heights, Illinois, where I grew up, and just having the wherewithal to self-finance and do my trips the place I wanted to go. And it was first started out with Europe and then Asia, but I also dipped down to Australia and went to Egypt. Sorry guys, I got a little bit of a cough. And then made my way back to America, and finally this last year, early this year and last 2 months of 2018, I went down to South America for 4 months, including 26 days on a boat to Antarctica. So then I got in the 7 Continent Club. And it's just been really amazing to get to travel all these places and sort of tie it all together. Plus, look into some of these mysteries that we've heard so much about with Antarctica, and having a crack at seeing it for myself and asking questions, and going to several research stations, which was pretty amazing. So it's the same kind of thing. I just love to travel and love to ask questions and love to try to solve mysteries. And a lot of the esoteric subjects have to do with the great mysteries of the world, the hidden subjects. Another word for that is occult. So just delving into this with a healthy dose of traveling is really kind of my forte, what I talk about a lot at conferences and write about in my books as well.
Before we get into your recent travels, I'm curious, World Stompers was your first book, right?
Yeah.
And what inspired you to write that book?
Well, I was in Japan, and it was the very first week that I got hired. After you can come in with a 3-month tourist visa, And the second month in, I got hired for a 1-year stint. So I was actually in Japan for 14 months. And when I got that job, I realized, okay, now I'm going to be able to do it, pull off this 3-year trip around the world. And I started writing my first book, World Stompers, 1 week after getting that job, just handwriting in a journal, basically. And it took me several years to put it all together with some illustrations that I've done. And that book's still in print and still sell them and get letters back from people that was inspired to go and travel and do it. Because it's pretty much a mindset. You really have to want to go for an extended period of time. And of course, we get tied down with so many things: house, family, kids, car payments, jobs, boyfriends, girlfriends, parents, siblings. There's just so many reasons you can not leave. But I don't know. Somehow I was able to surmount them and get out there and check it out and do it myself. And I still continue to do it in my 50s.
So you were living in Japan for 14 months?
Yeah, Eigo no Sensei.
Were you traveling? Was that like a home base for you, and you were traveling from there for a while? Or
well, yeah, that gave me the opportunity to explore around Japan, and I went to all 4 of the main islands, and I went on a visa run to South Korea, and was doing weekend trips with some of the teacher buddy friends of mine. And I lived in this really cool city called Kyoto. And it was like Heidelberg, Germany. It was such a historic city. It was spared the bombs of World War II. So that was pretty cool to have a bike and explore all around that town, which is still like pretty much a medievally planned city. So just this is the kind of things I find myself doing year after year throughout my life.
The World Stompers book is really cool. I love all the hand written illustrations and stuff, hand-drawn illustrations. Yeah, it's got a cool like old school feel that you can tell you put a lot of work into it. It's great.
Right on. It's probably on that bookshelf right behind you, Joe.
It is. Yep. In the travel section. Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah. So tell us about your recent travels to South America. Let's start there.
Yeah. So I was working away in San Francisco, California. Everything was going along fine till about 18 months ago, a year and a half ago, when I got a letter saying that a new owner bought my building and they wanted my apartment, which was rent controlled. And now prices are going through the roof. And for what you would pay for a studio or a 1-bedroom, you could pretty much turn that into a mortgage payment. So when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. And I'm still looking to buy a house up in Lake Tahoe area. And I just gave myself a little time to look a little longer, I guess, see what happens in the financial world. And thought I didn't want to go down there. These are the 2 places in the world I haven't been to yet, and I really want to go. So I had known that one of the best ways to travel in South America or the whole Americas, there's a website called drivetheamericas.com. That's how I found this vehicle that I bought. And actually, when I was ready to sell it, was able to sell it. And so I had this great SUV with my girlfriend, Emily, and we had a kitchenette built into it and a bed. And of course, it was our transportation. Put 6,000 or 7,000 miles on it. Bought it in Santiago, Chile, drove it all the way up to Cusco and the Sacred Valley, then down through Bolivia, all the way through Argentina, which is a huge country, to get to Ushuaia, where we eventually got on a boat for 26 days to go to the Palmer Peninsula of Antarctica.
So it takes a month to just go across the sea to Antarctica?
No, it took us 92 hours to get down there.
Okay.
Ushuaia, but 6 days to get back because we had to tacked back against the wind. But we went by Cape Horn, which is a very famous highlight along the way. And so that was cool to see the southernmost tip of South America, the famous horn that separates the Atlantic and the Pacific, and very famously, notoriously stormy seas.
Did you go to, you went to like Machu Picchu and stuff though, right?
Yep, sure did. A couple days there with the Nassim Haramein group, the Resonance Academy. And Brian Forrester was on for part of the trip, giving us some great information, narration. And the whole thing about Peru, megaliths, and Bolivia too, is they just keep getting dated older and older and older. And the more you look into the real details of how they were built, you never see any chisel marks. You see kind of this mushrooming or pillowing effect, like they had achieved some kind of as yet known technology to render some of these blocks somewhat soft or malleable, because some of those joints that get fitted are just so crazily exact and at angles where all 3 or 4 blocks fit precisely in this totally unusual angle with seams that you can't even put a piece of paper or a credit card into. Really amazing. And one thing Forrester said is that area of Cuzco, Sacsayhuaman, 3 kilometers above, the Sacred Valley over the top, and then down the river to Ollantaytambo and Machu Picchu is the most densely populated zone of megalithic buildings in the world. And there's some of them you just see on the side of the road, some kind of little megalithic wall that barely even has a name. You're driving along and people don't even bat an eye. Had that been here or something, it would be this huge deal, big national park surrounding it. So they're just everywhere. And the other cool thing is the Inca trails just go on and on and on. So if you like hiking at high elevation, you can do many miles and even hike right up into Machu Picchu as well.
Isn't it like a very narrow road up there? Or
No, not really. We hiked about 5 kilometers up and back one day on the Inca Road out of Machu Picchu. It's probably about 3 people wide.
okay.
But the steps are incredibly well preserved and very expertly built.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the way Hiram Bingham had heard about it and followed the Inca Trail the same way we went up there and discovered Machu Picchu only 108 years ago. I mean, it was just covered in jungle. Somehow the Spanish missed it for centuries. They hadn't gone up there, but it was infested with these very poisonous snakes. And there's a huge concentration of them in the city. It was thought that they were left there to like protect the city. And a lot of people that were cutting away the jungle to clear Machu Picchu died from snake bites. Way higher incidence than any other place.
So the snakes are still around the area, right?
Well, they are, yeah. They're indigenous, but they seem to have been populated in that particular spot.
What are some precautions you have to take going into something like that then?
But say again?
There's some precautions you have to take when you're going into something like that?
Oh, no. Now it's all, I mean, that was when the trees were just engrossing the whole Machu Picchu city. It's all been cut away now.
Okay.
So it's totally safe. There are jungles around, but we didn't see any snakes. But it's possible. I suppose they could fall out of the tree on the trail once in a while.
That's scary. Imagine a snake just falling on you while you're like hiking. No.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
So, do you ever encounter any dangers like that? I mean, other than snakes and stuff on your trip to South America?
Usually the biggest danger is other people. People being idiots or trying to rip you off. And it's not the kind of stick-up situation. It's the break into your room when you're not there and steal your stuff when you're down at the beach or grab your bag. Little petty theft. But fortunately, we didn't experience any of that. Except for the very first day going through the airport, someone pilfered through our zippers in our backpack and stole a few things. That was the only petty theft of the whole trip. We got pretty lucky in that regard, because that could bum you out if you lose, say, your GoPro and then you can't shoot any movies and things like that.
Especially on the first day.
Yeah, for me, it was just some small items. It wasn't a big deal.
So what are some other anomalies of the spot?
Yeah, so this is what I've been really interested in doing myself for over a year, is looking at GPS coordinates, trying to triangulate some of the things we see, trying to substantiate some of the rumors, or even some of the pictures and validate if they're real or not. And I'll show you some that I think are authentic and then others that aren't. Do we want to move on to the slides of Antarctica?
Yeah, let's go to Antarctica, but tell us about the trip there. What about the
Getting there.
Okay, well, this is a good slide to start on because you can see it says in red the Drake Passage. And that is just out of view, but above that arrow is the southern tip of South America. And Ushuaia is a city, the southernmost city in the world, that is right on the Beagle Channel. And that's where we got on our sailboat, and 90% of all the cruise ships leave from there. And cruise ships can make the Drake in 2 days. We took 92 hours, which is almost record time, but our captain took us into a bit of a storm. And seasickness was very prevalent on the boat. It was very rough seas going down. But where the tip of that Drake Passage arrow is, that is called King George Island. That was our first stop out in the South Shetland Islands. And the crew and owner of the boat were Polish, and most of the people on it, there were 11 Poles and 3 Americans. And our first stop was the Arktowski Research Station on King George Island. So we got a nice reprieve and got to go in and be on land again. After being sick on the boat, it felt great to take a shower and eat a solid meal with them. And even the one and only time I got online and was able to do an update from Antarctica saying that we had reached it. But we still hadn't really reached mainland Antarctica. That would have taken several more days when we crossed the Bransfield Strait to get to the peninsula. And then finally we did step land on the Palmer Peninsula a couple times. But that's out in West Antarctica, what you see there, the Antarctica Pyramid. And when we were still out in the South Shetland Islands, we went to an island called Deception Island, which is a huge sunken volcano. And there's just one little slip where you can get in, and it's a sheltered bay inside. And there are all some bases still occupied and others that were abandoned. And we went to an old whaling station, British base, that had been destroyed by a volcanic eruption in 1969. So all the buildings were just left as ruins, but it was still smoldering hot sand. And there was a hot spring. Had it not been for the high tide coming in, we might have been able to take a hot spring soak in Antarctica.
So what's Antarctica like over there? Like when you think of Antarctica, you think of ice and snow. You're talking about volcanoes, and I can see some green on that map, I think. Is that
not hardly any green, really? There are a few patches of grass and mosses and fungus, but really it's the colors you see are black, white, and blue.
Okay.
Those are the main primary colors, especially when you get to the Antarctic Peninsula. The South Shetlands are a little bit warmer. And you can see on this map, the South Orkneys, they're even warmer still. And then just out of range on that map is the Falkland Islands. So there are quite a few islands, they call them pan-Antarctic islands, that surround the peninsula, and especially up in this area, including quite a few research stations as well. And we went to 6 in total in the 15 full days that we were on sail in Antarctica, and then it took us 6 days to get back. So the whole trip was 26 days in a cot, in a boat, with 11 Polish guys, 2 women, and Emily, my girlfriend, and another American, Luke dog. So it was us 3 Americans that hung out a lot, but they would take us off and do little side trips in the Zodiac. So if we wanted to go see some whales, they'd take us out there, get pretty close. Emily really wanted to jump on an iceberg, and they pulled up and let us jump off and kind of get the feel and play around and stuff. And there were other hikes we did, treks across the ice to go to an abandoned research station. So every day was a new adventure, and seeing all the wildlife down there was just tremendous. They really have no fear of humans, because you can go right up to a mother and baby penguins, like as close as I am to the computer screen, and they're penguins are like trying to look around you. They're like, hey, you're blocking my view, because we're almost invisible to them. They don't perceive us as a threat. And then a whale swam under our boat. The seals on icebergs floating by, and they're just as curious to see us as we are them. And all kinds of birds, including albatross, one of the biggest birds in the world, just flying over the Drake Passage. Just incredible things like that. Calving glaciers breaking off into the ocean, and we're on a small sailboat, but huge cruise ships too were passing us once in a while. But right now it's pitch black right after the solstice down there, winter solstice, below the Antarctica Circle, which you can see written just above the word Drake Passage. That's where everywhere below it this time of year is 24 hours of darkness. So we got to within 1 degree of the Antarctica Circle, and I was there almost not quite 6 months ago, but we left 5 weeks after the solstice. So the days were still very, very long. It was about 22 hours of either twilight or 18 hours of total daylight. So that was kind of cool to be that far south and get that effect. But I can say that there is no flat Earth, that we're definitely on a sphere, and
That's
if you go down the Antarctica, it proves it.
You heard it here.
Heard it here first, folks.
There is no flat Earth. Proof.
So, what are some of the weirder aspects of Antarctica, and what did you do to try to? I'm sure you brought it up to some people there. Did you bring it up? Some of the mysteries surrounding Antarctica?
Oh, everywhere we went, I asked the same questions. You ever heard of a craft under the ice? You ever heard of any antediluvian civilizations like megalithic buildings? You ever hear of secret under ice bases? You ever hear of pyramids poking through the ice? And almost uniformly, the answer was no. But we did get a couple times, some interesting replies. And there you go. That's the underground lake and river system. Are we talking about these yet, or?
Yeah, go for it.
Just looking through. Okay, well, this is the river system. You don't think Antarctica to be filled with lakes and rivers, but there they are, and it is. And some of them are quite extensive and drain many underground lakes. Some of them, like Lake Vostok, pictured here, is one of the top 10 biggest lakes in the world. It's about the size of Lake Ontario, one of the Great Lakes. And it's under over 2 miles of ice. Thick, just incredibly thick. Some places up to 3 miles deep. Some of these domes. And Antarctica is really 2 continents, and you can kind of see it in this picture because those areas in purple may be very low elevation areas that could even be partly wetland if it were all the ice were gone. So you can see Antarctica has these very deep channels, especially up on that area, New Schwabenland. If the U-boats had mapped out some of these underwater rivers that came from the sea, combined with the volcanic activity, the geothermal activity, you could find perfectly strategic hiding places. And if I were to be able to go back, certainly hunting around the New Schwabenland Base 211 would be on top of my list, that and the South Pole and Beardmore Glacier. So there are these paranormal hotspots in Antarctica too, which is interesting, including the South Pole. And one thing we did find out for sure, there is a no-fly zone over the South Pole. And that's kind of unusual because really there's so little traffic going there right now. For example, in the winter down there, right now there's only 1,000 people on the whole continent. And that is the 5th largest continent in the world. There's only 1,000 people on it. So it's really this land out of time, this lost continent covered in ice, shrouded in mystery. It's also the most volcanically active continent with 91 active volcanoes. If you want to go back to the rift zone map, some of them aren't even on there, like the rift zone that goes up through New Schwabenland. It's indicated as Drowning Maud Land. That's where the German base was. That's where they were very interested in colonizing that mountain range right on the top of Drowning Maud Land. And there is a rift that goes all the way through there, and it creates these geothermal lakes called the Schumacher Ponds. And it's right around there that is the presumed location of Base 211 or a New Berlin base somewhere in the Arctic or Antarctic, according to Admiral Dolence in 1943, was talking to some cadets. And he said, we have created an impregnable fortress for the Fuhrer. And he described it as being in this land surrounded by ice. So again, if the U-boats could navigate some of those rivers under the ice undetected, it could be quite possible that the end of the war, they got a lot of their high technology out there and already had some laboratories and some secured areas set up where their research could continue. And then, of course, you have Admiral Byrd going down there in 1946, 1947 and hightailing it out of there real quick, and was supposedly confronted with an enemy that could fly pole to pole at incredible speeds. So then that brings in the whole concept of the Fourth Reich in America and this infection of Nazis, not only in our country through Project Paperclip, but we went to some locations in South America where massive tracts of land was bought up around 1930s, 1940s, very rich Germans still down there, and the possibility of hidden bases, both in South America and Antarctica. A lot of people are interested in this subject down there because it's so close to them, but it's really hard to get to this particular area. In fact, if you wanted to go to the New Schwabenland, the best way to approach it is from South Africa. Just like the best way to go to the McMurdo base, if you wanted to go to Beardmore Glacier in the Transantarctic Mountains there in the South Pole, is from McMurdo. And you can see that indicated on the map down in the bottom above the Ross Sea. So there's entry points into the continent, but the distances are so incredibly vast. Being a continent that's twice as big as Australia and bigger than Europe and about the size of the lower 48 and Canada combined. So you can just imagine how vast these distances are. And then when you're up on the polar plateau, it's very dry. Antarctica is a desert continent, and a big problem they have at the Amundsen Scott South Pole Station is static electricity, because it's so dry. It's just, you're sparking everything up. So there's a lot of challenges for being there, and especially now, 4 full months of darkness. They're only halfway through until twilight appears for 2 months. And then at the South Pole, if you were to view the whole year, the sun would pop up one time and for 4 months just circle in the sky, and then it would go down, pop. I guess it goes kind of flat against the horizon, then down. Twilight for 2 months, and then 4 months of total darkness. But then you get to see the Aurora Australis, the southern lights, which can only be best viewed up on the polar plateau there.
That's amazing. So you say there's a no-fly zone at the pole, huh?
Yes, that is absolutely established. And if you do a trip there, they do allow people to go visit the South Pole, but you have to come in from designated routes. You can come straight up from McMurdo, I know, but there was a whistleblower talking to Linda Moulton Howe, Brian S., who said they had to fly towards that Wilhelm II land. There's the Davis base, an Australian base. They were told to reroute around the South Pole area, and it made no sense. But when they were traveling straight out in that direction, he decided, because they were doing an emergency evacuation, to defy those orders, and they just flew straight towards Davis. And there they saw a massive hole in the ice. And it's a hole that our apparently NSA does the security of Amundsen Scott. That would be one thing. If I went down there, I would certainly like to investigate if there is a NSA footprint. But maybe these people don't want to talk to me, because I did get onto the Palmer base. You can see it on this map up on the Antarctic Peninsula there. And I asked all those questions, and he basically said, no, not something I know anything about. Could it be that he wasn't telling me? I don't know. He seems sincere and shrugged off all these questions or concepts of a massive craft under the ice. And we can take a look at those pictures. If I were to look at them today, I'd be a lot more skeptical than I was a year ago, like that one.
Yeah.
Because the only places I've ever found these displayed is in a movie called The Orion Conspiracy. Do you guys remember that? It came out around 2012.
Absolutely.
And there are some things in there about Antarctica which I know are absolutely false. And they had this series of photos. And I showed these around to some logistics people. And it was basically told to me there's another one with a double prop Huey helicopter. And he said, that really can't be Antarctica, because there are none of those on this continent. He said, maybe this is Greenland. I can't rule that out either. Or maybe it's just a very good high-res Photoshop job. But nobody knew about it. And you'd think if it exposes itself like this every year, and the backstory is they first found it in 75. It's like 3 miles across. There's a hidden entrance called the Door. I mean, this is what I was going down there to find out, you guys. And really nobody knew anything about this craft. So I guess that was a little bit of a disappointment. But hey, we know that they're out to disinform us and get us talking about nothing that doesn't really matter. So kind of wouldn't surprise me that there'd be some tomfoolery around the UFO issue down there. But I think the hole under the ice near the South Pole is a lot more credible, because even Admiral Byrd himself, flying over the South Pole, reported seeing it. And even the gaping hole was so big he was able to fly into it and find a cavity. I guess you could see it going in, that it was going to be big enough to get his plane around. And he went and did kind of a quick reconnaissance into the hole and flew out. But Admiral Byrd, he was a big talker. I don't know if he'd make stuff up, but it's interesting that there was some corroboration to a giant hole in the ice near South Pole, and where planes can't go. Another image of this 3 mile long disc. Take it with a grain of salt. Couldn't find any corroborating evidence while I was down there. But if you think about it, this would be the story of the year. Somebody would have gotten at least some video of it. Then we could maybe talk about it. Well, that was a picture of finding meteorites. Now, this one I think is more credible. It shouldn't say October 2018. That's just when I was grabbing these photos from a website. But you go back in the Wayback Machine to 2013, and you can see this very strange image, and what looks like a runway with that little loop for snowmobiles. And there are this kind of grill, something that's massive, with some other parts there where they might have also melted some things out. But if you look at the next slide, that's what it looks like today. And I was amazed when I went to this GPS coordinates that it matches up with what is known as the Conan base in inland New Schwabenland. And it's still a seasonal base to the Germans to this day. And by the way, the Germans never left South America. I have Cold War maps that show their bases were there as West Germany after the war. They never left. And so this is one of their seasonal bases called Conan. But this is what you'll see today. But it matches up with the number of those points sticking out with the number of grills in the previous photos. So it could be that there was just another layer of snow that buried it, and that's what's sticking out now. Again, this would be one of the cool reasons to go out to this particular location.
And you're able to get out there if you go, like you can actually go see.
Well, you can. If you got enough money, you can go pretty much anywhere. I found that there's not really many restrictions. A lot of people think it's this lockdown continent, but with enough money, there are expedition teams that can take you to different places. This one is inland and pretty far away. This one is another Google Earth. You can see like some pathways and what look like some kind of pyramid, step pyramid. And keep in mind that Mother Nature doesn't create in these perfect right angles. But whether or not this is some kind of artifact that could have been placed there, I don't know. We know sometimes Google can be a bit of a controversial company, and there are other parts of Antarctica that absolutely are whited out, like even obviously whited out, just like a screen over it. And some of these, like this, are just jaw-dropping. What the heck could that possibly be? But again, you're just looking at it in Google Earth. That's the only source you have. So until we can get someone down there to check this out, or maybe have access to some kind of independent satellite that's mapping out Antarctica to look at it, I think it needs to be double cross-referenced to really be authenticated, or someone get out there with some video and take a look at these things. But there's a whole bunch of these. I've got dozens of these slides that look like discs in the ice, that look like building formations, that are, some of them are openings with even a hood and a lid where it looks like a cave had been given a structure over the top. So there's a lot of really bizarre things you can find using Google Earth, and quite a few websites that'll guide you there if you do a keyword search on YouTube. I think a lot of those are still up. And this is some real science. This is what people do down there, and that is one of the things is finding meteorites. It is one of the richest places in the world to find them, but you got to wait until the season, which is March, ending in March, but you can get there in November. And it's just such a big white tableau that all meteorites that are falling on Earth can be found most easily in Antarctica. Of course, they fall everywhere, but if they land in the ocean, you're not going to find them. And if they land in a jungle, you're not going to find them. So Antarctica is the best place to collect them. And then they go back to NASA, and then they share them with other research groups. And when they're collecting them, everything is in a very sterile environment. Tongs are used and gloves, and they try not to touch them, but put them in sterilized bags and ship them out right away. But they find several per year, and a lot of times the glaciers can spit them out too, or facilitate finding them a little bit easier. So Beardmore Glacier is one of the top places to look for glacier or meteorites.
Awesome. What we got? Yeah, let's go back to that one with the ice and the red spots. What's that?
Yeah. Well, so now you can see the Palmer Peninsula up in the left, and a little bit of South America sticking out. That's what we had to sail back and forth. That's the Drake Passage. And where we were on the Palmer Peninsula, absolutely there is a lot of ice being retreating glaciers and melting ice. We saw it in so many different ways, both from old pictures and testimony of the ice just being shrunken from melting. So you can see new islands that are emerging right there in front of Palmer Base. They're showing us examples of it. and being able to see mountains that you never were able to see before from the Palmer Base, as well as what it's doing to the penguin colonies, upsetting the natural rhythm of things and displacing certain opportunistic penguin groups, the chin straps and the Gentoo penguins are from the south, but the cold weather penguins called the Adelie, they're the ones that are suffering and their colonies are dropping dramatically. But the other ones who can adapt to warmer waters are doing quite well. So you see quite a lot of examples with that. But what's so interesting about this map put out by NASA studying the level, the height of the ice, the places in red, it's retreating rapidly. But conversely, the places in the blue, it's actually accumulating ice. So that's why we haven't seen Miami Beach go underwater yet. Somehow Mother Nature knows that if it's melting somewhere to balance itself out, don't ask me how it's done, but this is really interesting because on my way back, I stopped at Miami Beach for 12 hours and yeah, there's no sea level rise and water seeks its own level. So if it were to go up in one ocean, it would go up in all oceans eventually. And it just hasn't happened yet. So that could be the reason why. And then, so this is the presumed hole, so big that you can see it from space. And that's what the Amundsen-Scott base is actually protecting, this massive chasm. Again, could it be Photoshop? I don't know. But there definitely is a no-fly zone over a big swath of land near the South Pole. And it's also what a lot of witnesses who have seen it have said, that that's what the no-fly zone is all about. Now, they have a bunch of sensitive equipment there. The clean air experiment, the ice cube experiments deep down under the ground. They're detecting neutrinos and cosmic waves coming out of the South Pole. And that might have something to do with this big gaping chasm.
Mm-hmm.
If there is something that big, maybe it is some kind of relief valve, almost like the torus of the Earth. I don't know. We have to get down there again and take a look. But that is one thing that is certain, is you cannot fly over half of the area near the South Pole.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It reminds me of the torus, like if Earth was this big torus, you know. And that
Yeah.
kind of makes sense with the magnet. Isn't that Nassim's big thing?
Oh, yeah.
Torus?
Yeah.
So,
So
yeah.
here's one of these presumed pyramids sticking out of the ice. And I showed this to my Antarctica logistics guy, and he recognized this one. This is in the Shackleton range, or maybe it's the Ellesmere range. There are pyramids supposed to be in both. He said this one is a nunatak, and that's a word they use for just an attractive rock sticking out of the ice. I said, well, look at how pyramidal it is. Has anybody ever climbed it or taken a sample from it? He thought maybe there have, but he didn't get back to me on that one yet. Not sure if they've ever climbed it or inspected it, but they fly by it all the time and know where this one is. So that's a possible opportunity to explore.
Awesome. Any other big takeaways from your trip?
Just that if you ever have an opportunity to go, it's certainly worth seeing. Just for the stark, frozen beauty of it all, and the amount of wildlife down there. You wouldn't think such a frozen planet could support such life, but they do. And here's something that really was shocking when I saw it. There was another boat that was going down around the same time as us, and we met up with them at the Ukrainian base called Vernansky. They were all scuba divers going on wreck dives, under the iceberg dives, and photographing sea anemones and other spider creatures. It looked like as colorful as a coral reef. You can't believe how much life exists even in sub-freezing water, including species that are completely unique to Antarctica, such as the ice fish, which have no hemoglobin, and their blood is like clear or white.
Wow.
And they've totally adapted to that sub-freezing temperatures, but are absolutely vital to the whole food chain, from penguins to seals and other animals that feed on them. So it's just this very rich seas, this upwelling of nutrients at the Antarctic convergence, and the Southern Sea, which is more fresh water from the melting ice, mixing with the more saline water of the oceans. And it's just this incredibly rich environment, one of the richest in the world. And if we were to ever lose that, we might lose a lot of life in the ocean. So it's worth preserving, and the Antarctica Treaty does just that. That prevents whaling below the 60-degree latitude mark. Everything below it is part of this biosphere, this international continental park, which is Antarctica. And it's like our national parks in this country, but this is a world biosphere that really belongs to everybody of the world. No land grabs are allowed, even though some countries lay claims. Their treaties don't really mean much to everybody else. So the Antarctica Treaty is like one of those few things that got ratified through the bureaucratic channels, United Nations, whatnot, that really did work very well and still is relevant today. So it's good that this area is being preserved, but also being watched and observed. And that's why a lot of scientists are down there watching the changing patterns with animals, from marine biologists to glaciologists and climatologists. There are a lot of pronounced changes are happening, and to go there and see it and really experience it is best firsthand way. And I may have an opportunity to go back next year. Let's see if this possible film crew deal works out, but not going to count on it yet.
That'd be cool. Do we want to get to some questions from the chat?
Yeah,
Sure.
We got here. Let's see. Tanner asks if you've had a personal experience with UFOs that got you interested in the subject.
Yeah, I have. Really, that was 1997. I was hiking up at Crater Lake with some other fellow backpackers, and we both, three of us, saw these streaking lights in the sky that were going right into the center of Crater Lake, but they had no sound, and they just broke off into like blips, and for several seconds streaked across the sky. Like, could have been some kind of massive laser, but it seemed to me more at the time that it was interdimensional craft. So that, coupled with other times seeing some very anomalous things in the sky, as well as going up to East City Ranch and seeing all kinds of lights. The 2 nights I was up there with Clyde Lewis and the Ground Zero folks and James Gilliland, just such a show of lights lighting up, and then going into this section of Mount Adams where there is no civilization. I call it the zone of silence. And I went hiking up there to about 10,500 feet and look down into it, and it's just this very sharp lava zone. And then both nights we're seeing lights coming and going. So there's no way it was like flashlights or snowmobiles or Jeeps. There's no roads there. You just got to see it. Again, you got to see it to understand that there's a lot of activity, a paranormal hotspot to be sure.
Don't they like manifest the UFOs there? They kind of call on them and make them.
Yeah, James Gilliland's like, flare up, and then they light up really bright and then go back down, and they're streaking across the sky. All kinds of weird stuff like that. As late as you can stay up, you're seeing stuff just about every 5 or 10 minutes. That's really incredible.
That's amazing. And they say they come in and out of the mountain. Is that?
Yeah, that's another thing we saw. And then, but it's like the Marfa lights in Texas or Gulf Breeze down in the Panhandle, where you consistently see paranormal activity in the form of lights or orbs or flaring up lights in the sky that couldn't be satellites, but some kind of intelligent guided craft.
So cool. I want to see it.
What do you think they are?
Yeah. Ooh.
Yeah, ours or theirs. I don't know. Fast walker or slow walkers? Seem like fast walkers to me.
Right on. Do you want to tell us what's coming up next for you?
Oh, I got a couple of conferences in the fall doing 5D Las Vegas,
Ooh, that's
down in around LAX, September 14, 15. And then 12 days later up in Mount Shasta, the Avatars of the Earth. It's like a indoor, outdoor camping festival, speakers and music. That should be pretty cool. And then I'm going to go hiking up in Colorado with my family in August, going hut trips up in the 11,000 foot range mountains. And then maybe on my way back, might try to dip into Burning Man, see if I'm guided out there. But I want to go check out Skinwalker Ranch in northern Utah. I have a friend that has a bed and breakfast up there, and the logistics group that I'm talking to also has an office in Salt Lake City. So we're going to see about this film trip probably in August, and if the funding can be there, then I think these guys can make this trip happen.
Well, it's like an awesome life of world stomping.
Still doing it, yeah. Why not? And then I'm working on my third and final book in the Esoteric series called Beyond Esoteric, The Ultimate Journey. It'll have a lot of Antarctica information and other stuff. So that book is going to come out fall 2020. Hard deadline. I'm giving myself to do it. And plus I'm doing the Leo Zagami books and CCC Publishing. And then before you know it, we're going to start planning for the 21st annual Weird Street Faire next April or May. We'll find out in October when the Giants schedule comes out. But if people want to follow me, bradolsen.com. My YouTube channel is called Esoteric Series, CCC Publishing website. You can read about all my books and other authors that I publish. And find me on Facebook, same way, CCC Publishing, Sacred Place 108 Destinations, or Esoteric Book Series.
Awesome.
Awesome.
We have like 5 minutes. Can you touch on How Weird real quick and tell us what that is?
Yeah, sure. So when I started CCC Publishing back in the mid-1990s, I was living in this really cool, creative warehouse on Howard Street called the CCC, Consortium of Collective Consciousness. And we all were artists or producers or builders or publishers in my case. So I started my book business there. And then around the year 2000, we started a nonprofit called World Peace Through Technology and had some financing to do a project. So the first project was this How Weird Street Faire right out in front of our artist warehouse. And it was only a few hundred people the first year, and kept scaling it up every year, growing by about 10 or 15%. And then after year 8, we had to move 10 blocks down Howard to our current location. And that's when it really blew up to thousands of people. And now we're 20 or 22,000 people come to the How Weird every year. And it's the event that I founded and work with a couple of my directors and producers on it every year. And we get a lot of the stages and vendors, and everybody wants to come back. So it's just a great time out there. And
Like
so
20,000?
job.
20,000?
Yeah, 20.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's huge. We got to get you out for it, Joe.
I know, right?
You like electronic music. You totally dig it.
Yeah, did you ever
So
get...
it's like a day at Burning Man. It's just a fun excuse to dress up in a costume and come out and dancing in the street.
Has
that kind of thing.
have you gotten Lauren Bass Nectar yet?
He played in the early years.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, all the Bay Area legendary DJs played at How Weird one time or another.
That's awesome. I need to get there.
Yeah,
And you need to come back around these parts, going a little.
I know. I just had all my family on my mom's side come out for my mom's 80th birthday just a few weeks ago here in Santa Cruz. So I just kind of saw everybody, and I really need to get cracking on Beyond Esoteric and start finishing up these chapters and do author royalties coming up in the next week. And got a lot on my plate, and I'm still looking up in Tahoe to buy a house. But I think we might get some fireworks on the national stage here very soon, including some possibly financial correction type things. So that could be a good opportunity to buy if there's another downturn in the market. But right now, everything's like at the top of the game. It's the most expensive housing market out west here. So maybe I'll keep traveling another 6-8 months. I don't know.
Wait for the market to drop and go around.
I did buy my ski pass already for this upcoming winter, so I will be around at least half the time.
Awesome.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, sure.
Oh, wait. Oh, well, I don't know this one. Should we just, we got one question real quick from Dave.
Sure, go for it.
Did you ever get to check out the mountain of the Israeli-Palestinian friendship?
The mountain of Israeli-Palestinian friendship. I'm not sure I've heard of that. I've been to Israel twice, but where would that be?
I guess it is here.
Where?
Well, let's see. Expedition breaking ice. This is practice. Oh, Antarctica. I guess it is in Antarctica. Hold on here. I'm not getting a lot. It is in Antarctica.
Palestinian Israeli mountain. I've never heard of that.
Yeah,
But no, I wasn't there.
So that's a no. Sorry, Dave.
Can't let them all.
Can't win them all. Thank you so much for joining us in the chat. Thank you so much for your questions. Thank you, Brad, for joining us. And until next time, stay strange.
All right.